All right. Well, good morning slash afternoon again, and welcome to Practical Sharing. This is let me get that moving. This is a informal, informative, and we're hoping useful webinar series on resources, tools, and ideas, sort of looking at specifically for communication and social sciences librarians, but understanding that that is a wide range of experiences and expertises. So we're excited to have everyone here. The Communication Studies Committee is part of the Education, Behavioral, and Social Sciences section of ACRL. And I am Kristen Peace, and on behalf of the entire Communication Studies Committee, we are excited to introduce and to have speaking with us today Sarah Morris. Sarah Morris is going to talk to us about navigating the AI hype cycle and communicating AI as librarians. So Sarah is a librarian, an educator, and curriculum designer. She is currently the Assistant Director of Academic Engagement at the University of Georgia Libraries. She has worked on curriculum projects with partners including the Carter Center, the Mozilla Foundation, and Sage Publishing. She holds a MSIS from the University of Texas at Austin and an MA in the Humanities from the University of Chicago. Her research and teaching interests include information and media literacy, artificial intelligence, mis and disinformation, LIS education, and civic engagement. And I will say a shout out that I took a class on AI and critical information literacy with Sarah over the summer, and it was fantastic. So I am very excited to welcome Sarah and hear what she has to say today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. And thanks for inviting me here today. And thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to join. I'm going to get my slides shared in just a second. I'm seeing some familiar names on the participant screen, which is fantastic. So excited to hear from you all today. All right. So we're going to be talking about one of my favorite slash most dreaded topics at the moment, which is AI hype. I'm sure we all have a lot of thoughts and feelings and opinions about this topic. So we're going to go through some case studies together, and I'll leave time for questions at the end. So let me get my slides pulled up really quick, and we can. Oop, okay, one second as we get that going. Okay. And let me know if y'all can see that either a thumbs up or in the chat. Just want to make sure this is showing up okay for everybody. Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So before I dive into today's topic, I just want to say if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll definitely have some time to address things at the end. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and examples and questions that are coming up for you. All right, so today we're going to be talking about navigating the hype cycle and communicating AI as librarians. So, and I went with a Halloween theme just to be, embracing the spooky season, and because AI hype itself can be a bit spooky at times. So, today's agenda, we're first going to talk a little bit about what AI hype actually is, as well as AI doom, which I sometimes view as sort of the, two sides of the same coin. We're going to look at hype cycles as well and how these sorts of things operate. And we'll look at some critical approaches to AI literacy and to addressing AI hype. And then we'll look at some case studies for actually communicating about AI. So hopefully you'll take something away today that you could adapt or use for your own campus. Alrighty. So first, what does AI hype actually say? So there's a lot of media churn, blogs, social media posts, all sorts of things emphasizing how powerful artificial intelligence and generative AI actually are. A lot of these accounts and this discourse is also coming out of various AI companies themselves, who, of course, have an incentive to get people excited about their product or get people sort of logging in, engaged, using, purchasing, whatever the case may be. So, this sort of powerful narrative, I think, is really coloring a lot of our discourse around AI, how we sort of perceive these tools, how we kind of grapple with them and understand them. Along with this sort of presumption of artificial intelligence being incredibly powerful are also accounts of AI being somehow magical or surreal. You might see a lot of accounts of people using these tools and being astonished at how fast they were, at how sort of incredible they were, how fast they work incredibly quickly, they produce things, with great amount of speed and accuracy, allegedly. So there's these sorts of accounts and language being used all the time. When you dig into this, though, you might start uncovering issues, as I'm sure you all know, like AI hallucinations, for example, and other issues we'll come to in a second. Aside from these sorts of through lines of magic and these tools being incredibly powerful, are also a lot of narratives and imagery about how these different artificial intelligence tools, generative AI in particular, and how they can be better, quote unquote, than humans at various tasks. So again, that speed element I see kind of prominently throughout a lot of the hype that, for instance, an AI tool can code something so much faster than a developer can, or it can produce a whole narrative or an email or a document much faster than anybody else can. Again, leaving accuracy aside is a sort of issue there. The last thing that I've sort of seen within a lot of AI hype narratives, and again, these could be coming from companies themselves, media outlets echoing with some of the proclamations and pronouncements from some of these companies, bloggers or individuals who are, interested or excited about promoting AI, are promises about how AI, and sometimes over promises, as the case may be, but how this technology will revolutionize different things. This could be the workforce, education, healthcare, you name it, AI will somehow do something around that sector. There's often a lack of details as to how this will actually come about. But again, I think this sort of ties back in to this hype story of these things being powerful, somehow magical, better than people, and all these sorts of terms and phrases and kind of narrative imagery that kind of combines together to generate this sort of storm of hype that we're all sort of existing in at the moment. So I think it's important to grapple with this and pay attention to trends, sort of what's being said, what AI hype actually looks like, because in many respects, the ways in which we talk about this technology, how we approach it, how we make decisions about it, and how we critically engage with it and analyze it is sort of shaped and colored by the hype narrative sort of environment that we're all existing in at the moment. So I think the presumption of the powerful nature of these tools, the speed of them, which again comes up an awful lot, the kind of magical nature of them, how they'll revolutionize things, all of this stuff can lead us to sometimes, I think, act in a certain way or make decisions in a certain way or presume certain things about artificial intelligence that can again have impacts for teaching, for learning, for decision making, for all sorts of things about how we engage with this technology. So that's just sort of roughly laying the groundwork of this kind of hype environment that we're existing in. But one other thing I wanted to touch upon before we get into some communication strategies is the idea of AI doom. So this to me is an interesting additional side of hype narratives. And the connection I see here is through a kind of narrative around power, actually. So a lot of doom narratives can actually assume that AI is incredibly powerful, and as such, it could potentially destroy society or trigger the apocalypse, or robots will be shooting laser beams out of their eyeballs and attacking everybody. There is a certain element of sci-fi dystopia and also apocalyptic religious narratives that can be at play in here. And AI can get presented as this existential threat to all of humanity. And I certainly think there are many, many concerns and issues with generative AI and with artificial intelligence writ large, with the way a lot of these companies operate, decisions being made, and so on, which we'll talk about more in a second. But some researchers, such as Emily Bender and Alex Hanna, who wrote the great book The AI Con, have mentioned that some of these doom narratives can actually distract from actual critical issues and concerns being posed by artificial intelligence because the doom narrative itself or the pronouncements within can get a little overblown sometimes. So again, all of this kind of ties back in to this overall hype machine with doom kind of being an element of that, that this technology is so incredibly powerful, can do all these wild things, can work so quickly, could replace humans, and all of these sort of concerns bound up in that. So, one last thing I wanted to flag here in terms of grappling with and navigating these sort of hype trends and hype narratives we're seeing is increased attention to the emergence of an AI bubble. So, some of you have probably come across different reports around this. The Atlantic just did a major piece on the formation of an AI bubble. If you follow financial news at all, you might have come across this. But I wanted to mention this in light of these hype narratives that we're exploring, because I think that, again, the hype itself is sort of contributing to this bubble that seems to be forming. So, again, there's increased reports on a sort of emergence of a bubble around this. Some trends that we're seeing currently are very circular investments being made by a lot of different tech companies involved in the development of artificial intelligence tools and technologies, as in these companies are just sort of moving money around to one another. There's also a lot of reports on the relative lack of profitability by different AI companies. And as I mentioned earlier, a certain degree of perhaps overpromising by different companies about the features and the performance of different kinds of tools. So, this bubble that seems to be forming amidst all this sort of excitement and churn, I've seen some people say it reminds them of different past technology bubbles, like the early 2000s .com bubble. And you can probably think of other examples as well, where there's a lot of buzz and excitement around something, but then it doesn't quite pan out. And sort of the hype ends up dying down at some point. So, to illustrate this, I have this fantastic chart that I've used in classes before. If you've been in a class with me on AI with ACRL, you've probably seen this before, but I hope you still enjoy it. If it's new to you, allow me to introduce the Gartner hype cycle. So, this was actually developed in 1995 by a researcher at Gartner, which is a company. Her name is Jackie Finn, and she was looking at sort of historically different sorts of technologies and sort of this cycle a lot of them tend to go through when they sort of hit the scene, hit the market. So this roller coaster you're about to go on, which has some fabulous names of different stages, including trough of disillusionment and plateau of productivity. As a sidebar, I feel that this can map to someone's workday or something like a dissertation writing process as well. But her conception here is that the technology emerges and then you climb upward. And it seems like you're never going to stop climbing. Everything's great. It's amazing. So you have these sort of inflated expectations, which I definitely think we're seeing right now with a lot of AI and AI hype. As I noted, there's a huge emphasis on the speed of these things and how fabulous they are for productivity, how they can do all these tasks. At this point, I feel like you can name a task and somebody will trot out an AI for it. It can revolutionize stuff, replace people, on and on and on. You sort of know the story here. So these inflated expectations are growing and growing and growing. But what ends up happening is reality starts to intrude. So in the hype cycle visualization here, and the argument is that at a certain point, you're going to hit too much of a peak. Reality is going to step in. And then things are going to start sort of careening downward, where people are critiquing the technology more. Things aren't working as well as they should be. Maybe there's financial struggles with companies, bubbles are bursting that had been formed previously, and on and on. At a certain point, though, after you kind of hit this low point, the idea is that the people will start sort of figuring out what the technology is actually good for. So instead of saying this technology is great for every single thing under the sun, it can name a task, it can do it, it's the best thing ever. It'll say, this thing can do these three things really well, and that's pretty much it. And then you plateau into productivity. So I really like this cycle. I've, shared it with classes before, with students before. I think it's an interesting illustration and a way to open up conversation about the trends we're currently seeing with artificial intelligence, the hype narratives we're all kind of contending with and dealing with, and sort of situating this perhaps in a broader historical narrative of technological development, how people react to new technologies, and how certain media forces and companies, etc., kind of engage in this kind of hype cycle. So, this was something that I found incredibly useful in my own work and hopefully maybe inspires some ideas for all of you as well. So, in terms of actually navigating hype, now that we've sort of identified some elements of it, is just to say that it can be incredibly easy to get caught up in these hype narratives around AI. In some respects, they're inescapable. There's so much out there if you go searching for media coverage or different blog posts, different social media posts, research, on and on. A lot of the different things are sort of contributing to these hype narratives. And as we've seen, this sort of tricky situation where even things that might be critiquing artificial intelligence can still operate on the presumption of how powerful and amazing a lot of these tools are. So again, this can, I think, really influences how we talk about AI, decision making, and our ability to critically engage with this technology and to sort of develop a more critically and ethically centered AI literacy. So my question is, how can we as librarians actually offer up critical and also more nuanced perspectives about AI? And how can we navigate hype currents and doom currents and help other people do so? So for me, there's three sort of intersecting themes here that I want to talk about with some case studies. So the first is sort of leaning into information literacy and also a sort of more critically informed or critical information literacy and a critical AI literacy. Next would be really centering AI ethics in discourse as a way to kind of navigate a lot of the hype around AI and to sort of build community spaces for ongoing conversation about AI hype and AI in general. So, in terms of some communication strategies, and these are some things that have come up in my own work or things I've read about, and I'll share some examples here, is first is carving out some actual time and space for reflection and for conversation. Something I've heard a lot from students, from colleagues, from wonderful people and ACRL classes I've done, from just coworkers, on and on, is how overwhelming and fatiguing this current AI moment that we're all living through can actually be. There's an almost overwhelming amount of information being churned out all the time about artificial intelligence, hot takes galore. Again, all these companies kind of flooding everything with, hype narratives, and there can just be a lot of churn to navigate. So I think, again, having time, space for actual conversation and reflection can be quite critical as a way to navigate hype and sort of engage with others around these topics. Some other things that have come up for me is really centering ethical approaches, as I mentioned earlier, as a way to talk about AI and kind of navigate some of these hype narrative currents and to really center and embrace sort of openness and transparency in talking about these things. And also just to address really diverse and diverging opinions. People often have a lot of very different reactions to artificial intelligence. People can be excited about it, incredibly concerned about it. There can be fear bound up with it. Concern for varying issues, and there's almost a plethora and too many of them to choose from. there can be curiosity, and on and on. And I'm sure a lot of you have very different experiences and feelings and thoughts when it comes to generative AI, as do our faculty and students and other members of our communities. So for me, kind of keeping that in mind can be, I think, really important for not only navigating hype, but also just talking about AI with others. So, what I want to do now, in terms of the practical sharing of this talk, is to share two case studies from my own work and institution, and hopefully these provide some inspiration for you. So, the first case study is actually carving out space to have conversations. So, something I've been really interested in lately is leaning into sort of learning community models or sort of interest group models. So, the idea here is less about having answers or training people or tackling a specific topic, but to just be very intentional about creating a space where people can come with all their thoughts, all their feelings, all their questions and concerns, and just sort of come together and build community about this sort of shared experience we're all having trying to navigate hype. Um, Something I'm currently doing at my institution is we have these things called faculty interest groups. So I'm thrilled to be able to partner with a faculty member who teaches in sort of public policy and government department at my institution. And we're teaming up to have an interest group for instructors and faculty about AI and instruction and bringing it into the classroom. But something we're really trying to do is not have very set themes for these meetings, but to really leave them as open spaces for people to bring in their concerns, bring in their ideas, just bring themselves as they are, and sort of just talk about these issues together. And it's been interesting, the people who've been signing up for this. We've had people say that they are just so happy just to have a space to kind of sit down and make sense of some of the stuff and actually talk about it because it can feel so overwhelming. And I think there can be a lot of pressure to keep up with the latest trends, to keep up with the news around AI, to use the newest tool and all of this stuff, which again is sort of part of that hype narrative. So I think something that we as librarians could think about is either using the library as a space for these kinds of interactions or to have librarians serve as partners for this kind of open dialogue and conversation around AI. I think this can be an opportunity to actually get feedback and insights from people where they might share, I have X concern, or I'm, worried about this, or wondering how to deal with this issue. And I think it's also, again, just a chance to help people deal with the information overwhelm and sort of the complex feelings that can really be surrounding AI. So, not to say that we have all the answers together or that we know exactly what to do, but that we can at least make space for feeling our feelings, so to speak, expressing different ideas, and maybe even just feel a little less isolated when it comes to dealing with AI. I think sometimes when it comes to AI hype in particular, it can feel a little isolating if perhaps you're not agreeing with something, or you might feel, am I the only one who's asking a question about this? Or does anybody else think this sounds a little suspect? Or am I seeing a bubble here and no one else is? So even just that confirmation that you're perhaps not alone and maybe expressing some skepticism or some alternative viewpoints can, I think, be really rewarding. And as librarians and our libraries as spaces, I think we could, make room for a lot of different opinions and ideas and hold some space for all of that. So that is my first strategy that I've employed in the past, and that sort of learning community model, which could be internal for librarians as well, or an interest group that maybe brings in faculty for conversations, can I think be really rewarding and a way to perhaps tease out some of these hype narratives and sort of ask really good questions. So the second case study is being sort of more strategic with resource creation. So I think as librarians, and I certainly do this too, I often think about things we can do in classes or workshops we can provide and resource and knowledge, all sorts of things that can help people navigate this kind of current AI moment. And certainly, I'm sure many of you have. We've done this at my institution, developed resources on things like prompt literacy and actually using these tools, etc. But to tell you a quick anecdote and then get into some other things here, I was at a meeting recently that had sort of representatives from across campus, different units, including the Writing Center, IT, libraries, Office of Research, and so on and so forth. And people were sharing about how they had been using AI in their units. And something that we had created at my unit in the library was an online course about AI literacy for instructors, which is a great resource. It has lots of different modules. And I was listing them out. I noticed the entire audience sort of perked up when I mentioned that we had a whole module dedicated to ethics and environmental issues around AI. And it was really interesting to see the amount of people who really were eager for that kind of content. And I thought more people would maybe be interested in other modules, but nobody cared about prompting. They all wanted to talk about ethical issues and environmental things. And so I think that whether it's having listening sessions or kind of keeping an eye on what people might be asking about or filling gaps, or whether you're using different resources, whether it's a LibGuide, an online class, a bibliography, as a way to perhaps raise issues that could maybe cut through some of the AI hype or bring things to consideration that perhaps aren't getting as much attention and maybe some of the clamor to hop on the bandwagon with these tools and use them and the excitement. I think that kind of strategic resource creation could be something we as libraries and librarians can kind of lean into and perhaps open the door for further conversations around campus. Sort of as a follow-up to that meeting, I'm on another group that's actually working on a bibliography around kind of environmental issues around AI, because that was something that was coming up repeatedly that faculty wanted to address it in the classroom, but felt sort of overwhelmed or uncertain about where to start and sort of what to do. So again, I think whether it's a guide, a bibliography, anything that comes to mind, that these kinds of resources can be ways to navigate some of these currents of AI hype, bring things to people's attention, or open the door for different kinds of conversations, or fill certain gaps that could be emerging. So I think there can be some strategy with that, and getting back to some of these other communication strategies to open up space for different opinions, open up space for dialogue, or just to help people feel less overwhelmed with certain really thorny issues when it comes to artificial intelligence and Gen AI. So this can again be a way to raise concerns, and I think hopefully do so in a sort of nuanced and critical way. Something else that happened at that meeting that was interesting to see was people were talking about how they were using AI for different things, and people were also bringing up environmental concerns, which is fantastic. But I could see people who had been using these tools, in one case, sort of deflate a little. And, you don't want to put someone on the spot or call them out for something. There can be lots of different applications for these things and opinions for these things. So I think, again, something we as librarians could consider, a place we can excel, and a way we can sort of communicate through all of this with others is to, again, provide space for different opinions and different sentiments around artificial intelligence. So ultimately, I think whether we're communicating with stakeholders, I had two examples here with faculty, but this could also apply with students. But just to consider how we can either use our spaces or proactively use our ability to create resources to further different conversations, to perhaps help people gain a better awareness of some of the critical issues surrounding AI, and perhaps be able to turn a slightly more critical eye to AI hype. Ultimately, I would say I think a lot of AI literacy that we talk about also needs to account for the hype narratives we're all kind of experiencing around AI and how that affects how we choose to use it or not, our decisions, our conversations about it, and sort of how we sort of perceive of it ultimately. So these were just two brief case studies that I've had some experience with that can hopefully get our own conversation going about ways to approach AI hype, ways to navigate it, and how you've sort of engaged with others around this. All right. So I wanted just to stop there for questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like to share in the chat, that would be fantastic. We can keep an eye on those. And I have some resources I'll flag here real quick. Um, I have some great blogs I like that have kind of ongoing commentary on AI hype, as well as a couple of articles referenced, including the new competencies for academic library workers that I'm sure many of you have seen come out. And so we can certainly get into that or other topics as well. So, alrighty. So let's see if anyone has any questions. Please feel free to put them in. So, I'm glad somebody likes spooky season. Hooray. Let's see. Okay, so people. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the person who mentioned sort of the toxic positivity. There is a definite element of that with some of the hype. And I do think that you're exactly right that critique or concern can sort of look crazy or it can look like you're sort of a hater, quote unquote, or like you're just spousing off doom and you're not really with the program. So I think, I mean, people joke about being a Luddite, but there's sort of an element of I think there can be an element of, I guess, judgment sometimes within people sort of caught up in certain hype around it. So I think I really appreciate you flagging that. And I think that can be something that's important to whether we're in a class teaching students to how to maybe critically analyze hype narratives themselves, or we're just thinking about ways to sort of open up conversation or space for other kinds of views and opinions, whether a learning community or whatnot. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Okay, and I see someone ask ChatGPT where it fell on the hype cycle. Okay, I'm glad it knew the Gartner hype cycle, and I don't know if I'd say it's reached the plateau of productivity, but I'm glad it thinks so. That is, the confidence there is pretty good. I might argue that it's sort of down down further on the roller coaster ride. So exactly. So, all right, quick Zoom question. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Andrea Baer's article is really fantastic. I enjoyed it a great deal, and I think that is definitely a good thing to check out if you haven't read it. So, and we can certainly send these slides out after. But yeah, if there's other questions, definitely let me know. While I'll see if anything else is coming in, I did want to note that. Oh wait, sorry. There's something come in. Awesome. Um, oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah. I too, I go to all the AI professional development things as well. So yeah, it can be, there's so many different ways to approach it right now. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And if any of you are sort of having conversations on your campus right now, even if it's not a question, you just want to share something, it'd be great to see what other people are up to. I sometimes, yeah, I'm just curious, especially if anyone's sort of in a liaison role, because I'm not actually in one right now myself. So it's kind of a different way of sort of interacting with folks on campus or different kinds of spaces. I'm sure some of you are on AI committees and things like that, which has been just interesting to see kind of the conversation that comes up with faculty versus other kinds of administrators sometimes. There can be disciplinary differences that are really interesting to navigate as well. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you. So the AI literacy course is it actually isn't available to the public. So you have to be affiliated with UGA. But if you want to shoot me an email and I'll stick my email in the chat right now, I'd be happy to chat with you about sort of that development process or share resources and things from it. But we sort of have an internal content management platform for it, and you sort of have to be with the institution to log up. But there's my email if you'd like to chat about it. Yeah, the I was really fortunate to get to work with a team of people who developed it, and they did a really, really fantastic job. Did a lot of research about different aspects of AI literacy, including evaluating outputs, prompting, having kind of an understanding of different kinds of tools and things like that. But yeah, it's been interesting the amount of people who really lock in on the ethics and environmental issues section of it, which to me was saying that there actually might be more people maybe sharing these concerns, maybe not having a space to express or have those kinds of conversations, or just sort of questions and not really knowing where to get started. So, and then let's see, somebody hosted a session on tools. Oh, that sounds really cool, Fiona. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Compliment the literature. Very interesting. Yeah. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are doing really fantastic workshops and things right now. And yes, Kristen, thanks for plugging the Live Guide for your committee, which I have checked out before and has some really helpful resources. So if you're in the communication studies arena, you can definitely explore that. So, all right. And then somebody's sharing they received a list of citations from a professor asking how to find the PDFs for each of them. Oh no, and they were AI hallucinations. Oh no, yeah. I think you're exactly right that so many of us are kind of so steeped in this right now. As librarians, we're very aware of some of these hallucination problems, but a lot of people just don't know this is an issue or a thing. And I think that's really important to remember. And I think something that can be a problem with a lot of these hype narratives as well is it can sort of conceal certain issues sometimes, or maybe the discussion's trending in a different direction, and people can just think, oh, it's amazing, it can do the stuff, great, it's reliable, it's fast, on, and not really, know what they're getting into. So yeah, there's a lot of education work to do. I 100% agree. So yeah, thank you for sharing that anecdote. And, this is always the perennial trouble of librarians with the one-shot instruction and just trying to outreach to as many people as we can across campus. But I think sometimes those faculty conversations and partnerships can maybe open some doors for more information. So, um, yeah, and it's hard to tell what types of things people are doing, yeah, in their own environments and how it's being received. Yeah, I think there can be a lot of siloing around how people are interacting with these tools, and maybe a lot of people just sort of privately doing their own thing or having their own opinions and not necessarily having a space to share. Um, yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. If you have English faculty asking you to check citations for to see if they're real, yeah, that's like a lot. And it's sort of a job in and of itself. So, goodness. Yeah. And I definitely feel for faculty trying to navigate academic integrity issues and policies around student work and all sorts of things right now. I'd be curious if any of you have policies at your school, or if it's sort of left up to the faculty member as to what they want to do in their classes, which again, I think can definitely be tricky to navigate and sort of a lot of decisions that have to be made about the approach. So I guess pro and con of not having a policy versus having a policy. Absolutely. So fantastic. Thank you all for sharing different anecdotes and things in the chat. This is fantastic. So let's see. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, for sharing your policy at University of Charleston. Yeah. Excellent. I like that. Yeah, it sort of at least talks about how you can and can't use it, how to decide it. That's a definite good first step because I think that could be um, definitely tricky for people. One other thing I didn't really get into for this presentation, but it happened recently. I was at yet another endless committee meetings, but it had a student representative there who was noting that so many students are really just concerned about future work and jobs and what happens when they go in the workplace in terms of AI sort of affecting that landscape, or what do they need to know in order to get jobs. And it's interesting to see how those conversations are flowing in sort of student circles and the differences you might see with other people talking about AI for teaching, for learning, sort of what the expectations are for classes and what students are hoping to get out of those classes. So I thought that was quite interesting. And again, also everything goes back to the hype cycle and to the point where these narratives about how AI is going to change the whole workforce and do all these things. And in some respects, it can be hard to sort of know what the future is going to hold necessarily. So it can definitely be tricky, sort of navigating those real concerns students have, and then thinking about what sort of they need to know in terms of AI literacy, what's going to best equip them for future things. The landscape changes so quickly, it can be hard to sort of make predictions on that. So absolutely. But yeah, thanks for sharing some information about your policy. So fabulous. Okay. Well, I guess we can give it a little bit longer to see if there's any questions. And Kristen, if you have like wrap up announcements or anything you need to do. But yes, here are resources. And I put my email in the chat, but let me just hop to the last. There's my email on that slide as well. So if you'd ever like to chat about AI hype, AI doom, AI bubbles, anything at all, I find this really fascinating. I'm really interested in how this affects how we approach AI literacy and how we communicate with others about it. So please feel free to get in touch. And thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fantastic. Um, on behalf of the entire Communication Studies Committee, it was really fascinating.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm going to go back to my
Okay,
slides.
yeah, I'll let you get yours up. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, share. Um, we did the Q&A. So I will put into the chat right now. If anybody who is here joining us today has ideas or they're interested in actually sharing at a upcoming practical sharing, please go ahead and email me your ideas and we can get that going. But we're happy to hear from anybody who has something they think would be appropriate and useful for the larger communication studies librarian community. We will be doing this again in December, so keep an eye on all the listservs for that. And in the meantime, I just wanted to thank everybody and especially thank you very much, Sarah, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And thank you for having me, Kristen. This was fun. So
We are really happy to have you. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.
bye. Thank you, everyone.